Welcome back to Hoffman Tactical. Today's video, I'm going to show you how you can paint your Orca like this. I'm going to show you how to prep it, mask it, and paint it in today's video, so stick around. The first step is to remove all the parts from the Orca. Then I'm going to put the upper receiver and lower receiver back together to make it easier to mask the texture that is shared between the two parts. Then I'm going to use some alcohol, the lint-free cloth, to clean off all the texture and areas that I'm going to be painting. I also did a little bit of extra cleaning just in case I wanted to do extra painting later. Then I'm going to use some masking tape. I use frog tape, but any good quality masking tape should work. And I start with a handguard by masking off the inside. The goal here is to cover up the vent holes so that the paint spray cannot get on the inside and make a mess of the inside of the handguard, which is visible and doesn't look very good. I use a counterweight to lower it in, and then I use a rod of dowel of wood to smooth it out. Then we can start masking off the outside. The goal here is to mask off all of the areas that we don't want to paint, which is all of the smooth areas that are not textured. So I'm adding tape all around the borders of the texture and carefully working it in, making sure there are no wrinkles. That's kind of the important part here, is make sure the tape goes on flat and you don't try to curve it too much around a double curvature and cause any areas where the paint could leak in. Right here I had to kind of tuck the tape underneath the rail, and I tore the tape pinching it too much. I had to peel it off and restart. But the next one, I was more careful to kind of fold the tape first, and I folded it back and tucked it in there so it didn't tear, because we want to make sure that tape is up in all the little crevices and properly doing a masking job. And I'm very careful to fold the excess tape back out of the way so that it doesn't wrinkle and allow a little spot where paint can leak in. So we want to keep the tape flat and as few pieces of tape over the joint between the texture and the regular part. That's why I'm cutting it off here, to keep extra tape from layering up, which makes it harder to cut and remove later. I'm going to stuff a piece of paper into the end, cover it up with a piece of tape, and that'll help seal the end of the handguard, and it's easier than using a whole mess of tape to do it. And then we're going to use a round blunt object like the end of my X-Acto knife blade here to work the tape into the area we're about to cut it. And this makes cutting a bit easier, so I'm just kind of going around the edge of the texture with my tool, all the little details, kind of creating a little trough there in the tape, which I can now then follow with my knife blade on my X-Acto knife. Nice, sharp, fresh X-Acto knife blade. We're going to get in there, we're going to cut all that tape, and just around the edge. You do not want to overcut anywhere, really. And then we're going to peel it off very carefully. If there is a spot that comes up where the tape begins to stick, you can always take your knife, go in there, and make sure you finish cutting it. You don't want to tear the tape. That'll ruin the surface. You want a nice, crisp cut, and then you should be able to just go in there and just smoothly, cleanly peel it off. And then if there is a spot that you cut in the wrong place or did something that wasn't quite right, you can always take a little piece of tape, stick it on that spot, and then go back in there with your knife, cut it again, and carefully peel the excess away to patch that spot like I did here at one of the zip tie anchor points. Moving down to the stock next. This is the easiest thing to do. I basically take tape, wrap it around everywhere that has a joint between the texture and the parts I don't want to paint, and then I just go ahead and mask the whole thing off with tape on the areas where we don't want to paint the rest of the handguard, and just basically cover the whole thing with tape. Then we come in with our X-Acto knife blade, or the handle of our X-Acto knife, and we work it in at that joint just like we did with the handguard, and then we come back with our blade, we cut it, and then we peel it off just like with a handguard. And just take your time when doing the cutting. The cutting is the most important part. Take your time and then peel it off very slowly and carefully. And if there's a spot where you didn't quite cut it all the way through, make sure to get back in there and to cut it to get a good clean joint. And you can always clean up little bits or pieces afterwards. Just take your time and don't tear that tape. Now the upper and lower is the hardest part because of all of the tight curves and features. So you're going to want to use lots of small pieces of tape, making sure not to overbend any piece of tape on any double curvatures. And we're just going to start on the pistol grip, top and bottom. You'll notice I'm carefully bending that tape around the pistol grip so as not to have any wrinkles where we're going to have that seam where we have to cut it later. And we're just going to use lots of tape, making sure we trim it as needed to prevent extra tape from building up. And we're just going to put tape all around all the curves at the joints. just very carefully. And then after we do that, we can go ahead and apply tape to the entire part to cover it up. You can also use a bundle of paper and just tape it around the bottom edges for that, but I like to tape the whole thing because it's just easier. Then, same as last time, we work in all that tape. Because of all the curves on this, you want to make sure you really work that tape in and make sure that it's fully adhered to the surfaces before you start cutting it, or the tape could peel off where you don't want it to. So we're just going to work our way around, bottom and top of the pistol grip, and then you can make a cut down along the side of the pistol grip to allow you to just peel the tape off in a single piece without having to try to work it off as a ring. And then the front surface can be a little bit tricky to cut up in the front area, but it's not too bad if you just carefully work yourself around the takedown screw. You want to go around the top edge of that screw so that the screw gets painted with the texture and is whatever color the texture is. And then, boom, you're done. And your masking is almost completed. We're going to stuff some paper in and just cap off the front end of that upper receiver to keep paint from getting inside. And we're ready to move on to the hanging process. I'm using some cotton twine here and just tying it onto the parts and then using some tape to make sure it doesn't come off while painting and it is good and secure. The goal here is just to hang the parts so that they're easy to paint outdoors where I'm going to be painting them. If you have an indoor area to paint, that's great. I am painting outdoors, so I have to make sure that it's warm, the humidity is low, and today we had both of those things, but unfortunately, it was quite windy, which is definitely not optimal. The wind blows the paint around and makes it more difficult to do, so trying to find a still day really is best here. I use basic Rust-Oleum paint. Any kind of paint that's rated to bond to plastic should work fine here. There are better quality options, but I found that just the cheap Rust-Oleum works just fine. Now, it's important to pick a flat paint rather than a glossy paint because the glossy paint will tend to pool on the surface before filling the voids in the texture. A flat paint will go on more evenly, and I highly recommend you use it. Be sure to paint the texture both from the front side perpendicular to the surface as well as the top, bottom, and both sides to the right and left. This is important especially with blockier texture like on the Orca so that you coat all sides of the texture and then you don't have spots that don't get paint on them around the steeper edges of the texture below the top. Doing a number of thin coats with 10 to 20 minutes between them is a good way to ensure you get an even surface that isn't too tacky and dries relatively quickly. Because we're using a matte spray paint, I like to give it a little bit of extra shine on the painted areas by using a gloss clear coat over the top. All it takes is a thin coat applied lightly and it gives you a nice sheen to the surface and should help protect the paint from wearing down if you have enough time to cure. The trick to getting a nice even coat is doing very light coats with the spray can pretty far away from the part so that you get an even mist over the part of paint. It was tricky for me to do this today because it was so windy, but you really should go for it. If you get too close to the part, you will get paint pooling, and that is never a good thing. It'll not dry very well and look pretty crappy. So lots and lots of coats. Resist the temptation to get up close and just use more coats. It'll take some time, but it is worth it. Once you have a solid coat of paint down, give the parts a couple hours outside to finish curing before you bring them inside. If you do it too soon, you risk damaging the surface. Now that the parts are dry, you can then bring them back inside and peel off all of your masking tape, leaving behind the parts that are now painted. Once I removed the tape, I wanted to add a little touch of gray somewhere on the top of the Orca so it looked a little bit more like its namesake, the Orcinus Orca. Now, so what I did was I took a small brush and some gray spray paint, sprayed the paint onto a little sheet, and then I used the brush to apply it down the center area of my Picatinny rail. This didn't really work out that well. I added it. It took me a little while to do, but you can't really see it from most perspectives of the firearm. I kind of feel like the entire Picatinny rail should have been masked off and spray painted gray, and maybe I'll add a masking line in the future to do just this. But for now, we'll just stick to painting the texture white and leave that little bit of gray added up on top. It doesn't hurt anything, but I don't really think it adds anything either. I'm glad you made it this far in today's video. I hope you enjoyed the process of painting the Orca, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with when you paint your Orca. Getting a two-tone color scheme is kind of the basics here. You could do a lot more with other masking techniques, but I like painting the texture and really getting that two-tone color scheme. In today's video, we're really going for this Orca, natural Orca look. It'd be nice to add a little more gray somewhere, but I think right now I'm pretty happy with this build and the paint job on it. So be sure to stick around. If you haven't subscribed already, do so, and we'll be doing some more accuracy testing, some more technical stuff with this Orca. I actually have a epoxy bedded barrel mount and barrel in this guy, and I'm going to see what kind of results we can get out of that. I'm really hoping it improves the accuracy a lot. We will see. I don't know yet. Haven't tested it yet. I have to do that after I finish editing this video, so we will see how that goes. And be sure to check me out on my Odyssey page, because over here on YouTube things are very, very tenuous. And that's really about it, I think. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys again next time.